Hi everyone, welcome to week 5 of Literature 221. This is just a little video to kind of go through some of the readings this week and let you know about the assignments. Hopefully I have everyone's essays. If I do not, make sure to upload that ASAP if you would like for me to grade it. All right, so this week we're going to be focusing on the Harlem Renaissance and New Historicism. So first, let's go through the lesson. We are on week 5, the Harlem Renaissance. And if you need to go through some of the overview, these are the readings this week. However, I'm going to pull them up for you in a moment and kind of go through each one briefly. So to access the readings, click on the link on the bottom and you'll get into Entellus. And I would like for you to look through the American Modernism period. That gives you a little background of the Harlem Renaissance. I also want you to go through Langston Hughes's poetry. There are 4 poems: Mother to Son, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, I Too, and Harlem. Let's look at the details. Let's pull it up. Okay, so all of these works are important to American literary history. This is just a video, but let me see if I can pull it back again. I guess it. All right. Well, that's nice. It gives you an analysis too. All right, so I'm thinking out loud. So I'm not going to pull up the individual poems, but if you want to look at the individual poems, you might want to go ahead and Google Mother to Son, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, I Too, and Harlem. If you took English 200, you will have access to this poem and this poem already. What's interesting about Langston Hughes is prior to his work being published, African American literature and poetry was formed in a way to make itself similar to classical English and British poetry. And what Langston Hughes did was create poetry that illustrated African American culture and also made his work valid, and it also validated African American culture in that, yes, the culture during this time period, African American culture, has worth and is worthy of being studied. African Americans don't have to imitate British literature. Their literature is important and worthy of study as well, if that makes sense. So the Negro Speaks of Rivers kind of emphasizes this sort of desire to find acceptance in African American culture and history. So that's what makes his poetry different. And Harlem, and I have that highlighted right there, speaks of the inability for African Americans to achieve the American dream. Okay, and Mother to Son and I Too shows the difficulties that African Americans had during the first half of the 20th century, but also shows a hopefulness that even though there is a struggle, that African Americans can succeed still and become successful in their own right. That's why we're reading Langston Hughes, because his work isn't trying to imitate previous cultures and previous literatures. Instead, he creates a unique African American literature genre. Okay, literary genre. I hope that makes sense. So that's why we're studying Langston Hughes. And then also his biography kind of goes into that. And then we're also going to be discussing County Cullen. And we'll read the biography there as well. But let's go ahead and look at the biography is interesting. Read that on your own time. But let's kind of look through this particular poem. A lot of people have some difficulties understanding this poem, and it's small font. So if you need to, feel free to expand that by using the automatic zoom, or you can Google "Yet I Do Marvel." Okay, so this is a sonnet, and it is a typical sonnet, and so it has three sets of four lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a final couplet. Each set of four has a different point to make, and then the final couplet kind of drives home his overall point. So basically, he's bringing in these classical references and showing how these these characters were kind of tortured over and over again, wanting to desire these certain things but unable to get these certain things. And then you have the mole, which isn't a classical reference really, but a mole who continues around blind, who wanders around blind, and he's questioning why God does these things. Okay? So what he's using these as a comparison, he's comparing them to himself. Yet I do marvel at this curious thing to make a poet black and bid him sing. So basically, County Cullen has this ability to write poetry. I mean, this is a classical sonnet, and he's able to bring in classical references into this sonnet. He writes an iambic pentameter, which is very difficult. It means that there's a certain stress and unstress of syllables, and he maneuvers wording around to fit this kind of meter, stress on stress, stress on stress, into a classical sonnet. He has these abilities, and yet he's often ignored, even though he has this talent given to him by God, but he's ignored simply because he's black. Okay, so that's basically kind of the point of the poem. I want you to kind of examine this further. And what's interesting about County Cullen and Langston Hughes is that Langston Hughes is developing his own unique sort of African American literature, his own style, his own methods. And that's one way to bring in and to show that African American culture has worth in its own right. And then County Cullen comes in, and he's not really developing a unique method of writing per se, but he's using classical writing techniques to prove a point about the plight of African Americans. So those are the two ways to look at the two authors this week. So let me get out of there. Let's go through the next work, and we have Zora Neale Hurston. And there's a few things that you can read through here. And her work is a little bit different. It's a little more positive in some respects, but her work is definitely of worth. And let me see what else we have. I guess that's about it. Hopefully it'll pull up. Oh, there we go. I'm going to have to check. I will put in with this lesson about what specifically you're expected to read from Zora Neale Hurston. I'm assuming that you're not supposed to read all of this. So I'm going to clarify within, when I post this lesson, what specifically you're supposed to be reading. Okay? So let's go back and let's take a look at the forums. It's going to take a few moments to load, and I see a few of you have already posted. Thank you. There are several things that you need to focus on. First is you're supposed to take a historical event that took place around 20 years around the time of the work that you have chosen to write about for this first section. And basically what the point is for you to see how history influences works of literature. So that's what the first part is. And so New Historicism is a literary criticism that shows that literature does not exist in isolation, that history can affect literature. And so that's what your focus is for part one. And you could choose anything that we have discussed so far in this course. Number two is Yet I Do Marvel, which I have discussed with you already. Look up the classical reference in there and explain how that reference can contributes to the overall message. And now what you got from this particular poem does not necessarily have to be the same thing that I received or that I have explained here. You can use any interpretation that you felt was accurate with this particular poem. As long as you can prove it textually, I don't mind. And then the final one is The Negro Speaks of Rivers. I want you to examine that and discuss how rivers or water, bodies of water, affect this particular work. And then also think about previous works of literature that we have read in this course and discuss how that work of literature has, how water affects or plays a role in that particular work of literature. All right, well, that's it for the lesson this week. Like I said, I will check to see what you're supposed to be reading from Zora Neale Hurston. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week, and please send me a message if you have any questions or comments, or post in the open forum. I will have your essays graded by Friday. All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.